Dyslexia, ADHD, and the growth mindset entrepreneur. What more can I say to grab your attention? Please welcome Dr. Phyllis Books. She's the brain changer for game changers. She's the author of Reversing Dyslexia, How to Improve Learning and Behavior Without Drugs. Phyllis, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. I love talking to entrepreneurs.
Yes, and I've heard you on a colleague, like not a colleague, I can't even forget the word right now. A fellow person we know.
Yeah,
We'll use that fancy
yeah,
term. Gary Mottershead, who was, I believe, your strategic coach, associate coach, and mine as well. And you were also on his podcast called Confidence Generates Clarity, or Clarity Generates Confidence, one of the two. And you are definitely a dyslexia expert and knowledge with ADHD. So I think this is a perfect opportunity. There's a lot of ADHD entrepreneurs that have a dyslexic brain, that have had a lot of struggles and challenges in the past. And yet at the same time, that has helped them on their entrepreneurial journey to today. So let's just start with the easy one. What is dyslexia and what is the cause?
Well, you think that's the easy one. That's so dyslexia is so dys means, things don't work well. Lexia means words. And so the whole definition is around words, or the ability to read or to speak or whatever. And that's only a tiny part of dyslexia. But
it's even speaking, reading and speaking, you're saying?
It's language, it's words.
Oh,
Lexia means words.
I learned.
So, yes, well, so many times my people come in me, they'll trip over the words, or the words are in their head and that's not always synchronized with their brain. The words come out the wrong place in the sentence, or because the brain's working so fast. And like Ned Hallowell says, it's like you got this Porsche brain and you got a Chevrolet body. And so
those bicycle brakes.
Those two, they're out of sync sometimes. So most people think of dyslexia as a reading issue. I say that it's like a spectrum disorder, because for some people, it can be just a mild irritant and it shows up when you're tired or you're too stressed and so on. And for some people, it's really debilitating. So it can show up we think of it as reading. It's also very common is reversal, like not knowing right from left, getting confused a lot. And with little kids, when they're writing, they reverse some of the letters, and they put the letters or put the letter the wrong place in the sentence, the words the wrong, everything just gets jumbled up. So that was with words, but it also deals with physical coordination, and it deals with smooth processing. Like I remember going to a church with a friend, and there was a new minister, and I said, as he was walking down the aisle, I said to my friend, "I'll bet he's dyslexic." And she said, "How?"
By the way he was walking?
I said, "I can tell by the way he's walking."
Oh, wow, you're blowing my mind now.
His gait's off. There's just a little something in the gait that's not right. So a lot of times when I give speeches, I'll say, here are some things I'll bet you never thought of with dyslexia. There's 4 physical things to think of that totally affect the way your brain processes information. The first are your hips. So now this lady who I was telling about, she owned a men's store, and she said, "Oh, the hips are meant." Yes, I know, because when I'm altering their pants legs, the legs are often like a slightly different from one side to the other, the length, and their waistband, their belt doesn't fit on straight across. It's because it's uneven there.
Belt, really? Okay.
When she worked with me for years, she became like my business mom, because I helped her grandson who flunked 2 grades in school, and we had him reading in no time. And she said, "How do I help you?" I said, "Well, let's just help the whole world." So we did research studies. We published books, we did stuff, but it was all because she got really good at figuring out who was dyslexic too by watching them. So first of all, it's the gait. And then in the spine, many times there's just a slight scoliosis, which is a curve in the spine. It's not the dowager's hump when people get old. It's going back and forth. It's more common in women than men, but it does show up in men too. And the scapula, the wings and the back, will be more pronounced one side than the other if there's that little imbalance. And then the shoulders are going to be slightly off. The mouth is going to be out of round. When you open your mouth really wide, like that. Oh yeah. You're like a tire that's out of round, Andre. You're
You're the first person I call my belly tire. I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, it's out of round. And so then the jaw is always affected. So I would do a lot of work with orthodontists because I'll say you could be the first one that notices dyslexia, because every kid or adult with dyslexia has some sort of issue in the jaw. It can be jaws, malocclusion, not sleeping well at night because the jaw didn't fit quite right. And then we go up here in the eyes. There's always something around the eyes, and this is incredible. It looks like one eye is bigger than the other, or protrudes more, or one's more almond shaped. Not a whole lot, but enough. And but that's very important because that houses a bone called the sphenoid bone, and it's totally involved with dyslexia. And it's like the kingpin. It's in the inside of the bone of the head, but it touches 12 other bones. And so it's out of position. So is everything around it. So then emotions, like car sickness, seasickness is very common with dyslexia. Because these bones everything's just slightly out of place. And so those are physical clues. And for, in Canada, I know, but in America too, is like teachers aren't trained to look for that. Nobody looks at the physical reason why there might be dyslexia. But the way I look at it, it's like, as one of my great entrepreneurs who is really good with computers and good with music said, once I understand what you're doing, I've been told all my life, if you just tried harder. I've been told, put down all his life. And he said, once I had him reading on day 3, he'd flown over from England. And I said, okay, now it's time to read. And he had that look in his eye, like if he could run out of the room, he would. And he just read and he looked at me, he was like, well, I can't possibly have remembered that. And I said, well, we'll just see about that. Because it was such a shock to his system that whenever it's lined up, you can read. But so
and you're not used to it, so it's really throwing everything off kilter, right?
he didn't want to go to bed that night because he was afraid when he woke up the next morning, he wouldn't be able to read.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, when he finished, he said, I look at it, dyslexia so differently now. What I see is it's a brain synchronization and brain processing issue. You're just out of sync. Parts of your brain are out of sync with others, and the processing speed is off. And when you get all of that synced up the way it's supposed to, the dyslexia can go away.
Okay.
So it's really, to me, it's a processing and synchronization issue. I'm sure you'll have some days when you can read faster or more fluidly than others.
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah. Because when everything is right, when you've got the right nutrition and you've got the right food for your brain and you've been doing movement and so on, your brain's going to work better.
Okay, so the biggest thing here is I've never read anywhere anything about dyslexia as being also a physical affects the physical body affects it as well. Like
Yeah.
I'm a bit lost on this. I'm pretty sure a lot of the dyslexic people are going, what the hell? Like out around mouth, the gait, the shoulders, like that's a new one. So if your body, it's all connected. Your
All
brain
connected.
process, your body, your balance. You're talking
Yeah.
about vertigo. If the brain bones are in line, is throwing off your balance a bit. And your
Totally.
brain's trying to compensate for this and overwork in areas and not necessarily work well. Those.
It has to work so hard. And so one of the things when I work with entrepreneurs, one of the biggest things, their fear, first of all, they're just afraid because they don't want, like 18 or 21, you think, I think I got things kind of figured out. Like, don't change one thing. I can make it work as long as I do this formula. Just don't disrupt it. But what I say is then you're working like a piano has 8 octaves, there are 8 notes and there are 8 octaves. And because you don't play some of the octaves very well, you play 2 or 3 octaves really well and you play your strong suit.
Right.
And so and we all want to go to our strong suit because it makes us feel good about ourselves. But there's those other octaves that are being unused, and partly because they weren't used efficiently. And so
Mhm.
you stay away from them. But then what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs I work on in their 40s and 50s or 60s, they come in and they're just exhausted.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, and they go, I can't drink any more coffee. I can't drink any more stuff like, and I remember this was another uh, guy from Dan Sullivan I worked on his daughter who was 6 and her balance was just awful. And so we worked on that and then I didn't hear from them for a year or two. And they called back and said, would you work on nutritionally on us? Because nutrition is part of what I do. And when the analysis came back, I said to the guys, like, listen, you got to do something. You got to do it pretty quick. Your adrenals are shot. Like, you can't keep going like this. And he said, that's what I'm calling you, is because I know I can't keep this up. So
Yeah.
when I work with people, it's like, wouldn't it be nice if instead of playing on 3 octaves, you could play on 5 or 6? You don't have to be superb at them, but they're not at a deficit for you.
Right, and they're not holding you back anymore. They're kind of supplementing the other things in a forward
Right.
motion.
Right. And so you don't have to exhaust the good parts of your brain to compensate. You can just sort of
Yeah.
go back and forth better. So, for me, entrepreneurs, it's like their biggest thing is promise me you're not going to take away my creativity. Because
Well,
that's my
that's one of my questions I was gonna ask you later.
okay. Well, and I laugh and I go, actually, exactly the opposite is what's going to happen. Because right now your creativity is your strong suit, but when you get worn out, it won't be there. But when we take the pressure off of the other parts of the brain and let it work, what you're going to find is you are so much more creative now. You're going to come up with more
It's
company.
amplified.
It's amplified because there's no obstacles holding it back.
So the creativity I have right now with my brain that's overworking and being
Yep.
tired is actually going to get amplified a lot more. If I'm very creative right now, and I feel this is my best, I could be augmented by 2, 3 times because I got better. My brain is using its energy more effectively,
Yep.
and we can channel through that
Yep.
more so on the other and reduce fatigue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how does dyslexia look like to the person or to others? Like, I guess the stereotypical dyslexia thing is I can't read or I have problems reading or the letters are jumping around on the table or on the page, but yet numbers is not the problem, but the words are.
Right. Well, that's why I say in different parts of the brain. For dyslexia, it's very common. It's over here on the left side when I'm doing work. When you have trouble with numbers, it's usually on the other side.
So if you got problems with numbers, is that dyslexia or would that be more the dyscalculia?
That's just calcula.
Okay. All
But
right.
a lot of time, for a lot of people who are very dyslexic, they're very talented with anything with numbers.
Mm-hmm. I got a couple of friends exactly that they can do
Yeah.
numbers like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. So those have a funny marriage, and there's a funny marriage between computers and music. Music is a lot
Yeah.
of numbers.
Yeah.
And but it also has other parts. So combinations I've got
Patterns.
yeah, you just never, but I just like to take away the obstacles so that the creative part of you can be more creative. And the reason I worked with kids for like 30 years. And I liked working with kids because when you get them at 6, 7, 8, or 12 years old, you can
Oh,
change the trajectory of their life.
yeah.
And self-esteem doesn't have to go in the toilet. They don't have to look at the other kid and go, how come he's getting it, I'm not? And people say, oh, it's okay, but it's not. But so it's hard, and it doesn't have to be. To me, that it's just almost criminal that we
Right.
don't address it more.
So I like you use the term you like to remove the obstacle. I have here in my notes like my question was how can we cure dyslexia? But you're saying it's an obstacle. So how can we remove the obstacle of dyslexia?
Well, I work at it from several angles. I do it neurologically. My first training was as a teacher, and then my master's was in communication. And that's actually what helped me the most, was looking at systems, like what system in the body isn't working well. So then I became a chiropractor, which didn't make any sense at all, none whatsoever. It was one of those messages I got. But 40 years ago, there wasn't a field called neuroscience.
Right.
It didn't even exist. So if I wanted to learn about the brain, I had to become a chiropractor or a neurologist. So, but that master's in communication is what really gave me the toggle, how I could come up with this, new trademark technique that I never would have seen if I were in education, and I never would have seen if I'd been in medicine. Gave me a different way of looking at the problem. And when you look at it that other way, it's totally solvable. Totally. You just have to look with different eyes.
Yeah, it's usually the
Yeah.
case.
Yeah. So, and the thing with you, I see you wearing those colored glasses.
Yeah, it's a filter.
Yeah. So that when I work with people neurologically, there's a place when I'm putting my hands here and people go, "Oh, I'm starting to see colors." And
Well,
I'll go,
yeah.
yeah, because when you do the colored glasses, that's the attempt also when the eyes are flittering across the page, when you get the right color, it'll calm the eyes.
Mhm.
And so, but I can do the same thing with my hands. Is just do that so that you don't need to, you have the choice of where to wear those glasses or not. But the answers, the truth is the answers are all inside of us. We
Mhm.
just weren't taught how to look for it.
So just to get a little bit of comprehend my science size coming out a little bit here. So with the dyslexia, is it your eyes are taking in information, reading letters, words, then your brain's processing it. And is there a communication loss or confusion there, or the wires kind of put in backwards or
Oh,
not connected properly?
you're so smart. That's exactly what's happening. Yeah. So really, when we see only 6% of what we see is literally what we see. 94% is how our brain interprets what we saw.
Correct. Yeah.
And so there can be a lot of snafus or problems that go on in the interpretation, and the information just doesn't always go in the right place. So it's like defragging a computer.
Right.
You have a noisy, incoherent brain, and my job is to go in and clean up, to defrag the computer, clean up the sloppy connections that were the best you could do at the time, kind of clean those out, and then install a new program. So then I come in and I do it physically with a light touch, but while I'm doing that, I know exactly what part of the brain is being affected. And so then you can rewire the brain. And then I give people physical exercises that help myelinate the brain. So the brain learns a new pathway. And then you do like cross crawl exercises and things. So the brain gets balance and other things. So then it learns a new model of the way a brain could and should work. So it has a new default system.
So is neuroplasticity, is that a good term for it?
Totally.
Okay, so the fact, what I'm hearing, that if it's neuroplasticity, we can do this. It's not that we got a defective brain or we got a problem that can't be fixed. It's just, we just got to retrain the brain.
Right. We have to give it what it needs.
Right.
Yeah. And only I think for most people, when you've been dyslexic, it's like people who teach in schools, like they have no idea sometimes what the kids are going through. Or they do not teach the way they do it. They teach the way they learn, but it's not necessarily the way the child learns. So, 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic.
Yeah,
And
I've seen that number.
70% are ADHD.
Yeah.
And like half of the time, if you have one diagnosis, you have both. And you could have a few others thrown into a few other diagnoses. But they're all neurological, which means they're changeable.
Yeah. And so is there a relationship between dyslexia or ADHD, or just commonly, it's just one of those things that happen or coexist at the same time?
I think there's it's a neurological underpinning of things that they, like, half of the time, if you have one, you have the other, but they don't necessarily go together. But ADHD has its own gifts and curses. Your mind can be 14 places at the same time. And like, if you're an airline pilot, we want you ADHD. We want you looking at all those places because our survival might depend on it.
Yeah.
There are places where we need that.
Well, that's what I say. The ADHD is, it's a problem for other people, right? It's one of those mental health conditions that's assessed because it's problematic for others.
Right.
And if it's managed, there's strengths, and then when they're not managed, they become a disorder. But that's like any strength or condition that anyone has.
You need to learn how to play your strengths, but you can't ignore the weaknesses because they'll bite you. And
Correct. It's
yeah,
just
you need,
our weaknesses are not socially accepted. They're not following the norm, right? Or the
well,
social.
they don't fit in the system.
There's a better way of saying it. Yeah.
Schools are they teach kids in a certain way, and they don't make allowances for ADHD.
Yeah.
Or for kids who learn in different ways. And a lot of the dyslexic kids I know, they're really, really smart. But you know, you can't judge them by their other criteria because it doesn't apply to them.
Well, because they're measured by a certain stick, which is a
Right.
certain reading level and reading a
Right.
certain way and doing math and all that. And that's why I say
Right.
measuring, whose measuring stick are you using, yours or someone else's?
Exactly, exactly. You know, what I care so much about is people's self-esteem is that they don't judge when I'm working with children, that they don't decide that there's something flawed or wrong with them because they don't fit in the system. The
Correct.
problem can be in the system and there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah. And if you work well in the system, usually you work, like they say, sometimes you'll work for someone who didn't fit well in the system.
But you're much more likely to work for somebody.
Yeah.
An entrepreneur can't not be an entrepreneur.
No, unemployable. Definitely unemployable.
Totally.
So as an adult with dyslexia, you've gone through 30, 40 years of, shit. You don't feel good because you can't read, I'm not speaking from my experience, but some friends of mine have shared this. What can we do now to say, hey, something can be done? Or, it's not what I heard from you, it's not a moral failure. It's definitely not a moral
Absolutely.
failure.
No, you have to just keep looking for something that works for you. So when I work on the neurological part. I also look at nutrition. I do a big chunk on allergies because if you've got brain fog or brain fatigue or something else, you're not going to be at your best.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, with a lot of people, if they can't afford the whole thing, I'll say just start with the allergies because you got to find out what part of your symptoms and your physical health is really because it's a processing issue. Again, your body is misreading the information and treating the allergy like an enemy.
Right. That adds to more mental fatigue and energy fatigue from the body because it's working hard.
Right. And so it's like, that's a huge obstacle. It's like going through the swamp to get to the other side when you can just clean that up. And nutritionally, it's like, you got to give the brain the right food. If you want it, you can't put sugar in your gas tank and expect it to run well. And the same thing is true for your brain. And so I work on like nutrition and allergies and getting a lot of exercises that just helps the brain work better. And for a lot with dyslexia, a lot of times I'll recommend music. And some people are already, but music actually heals the brain. It helps knit parts of the brain together that weren't together before. And Einstein was famous. And they thought he was really not just a dyslexic, they thought he was retarded because he didn't read until he was 8 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
He would get stuck on a science problem. He wasn't very good at math either, by the way. He would take out his violin and play for a while. And so he just let that side of his brain rest, worked this side, and then they sent the information back and forth. So, music is good for all kinds of things. And martial arts I like too because
That's a lot of body coordination, right? And balance.
totally. And self-control, you learn.
Yeah, mindfulness. Yeah.
Mindfulness. So I think those are all good too. And then actually the neurological work, though, the way to do that, just come see me. Come spend a week with me and you'll go home without it.
A lot of stuff you're saying, because there's another treatment for ADHD with kids that has to do with the cerebellum. So a lot of their exercise is all about balance, and it's just those silly physiotherapy type exercises, but it's all about balance, and then the cerebellum gets reinforced. Is it something along the same lines with the dyslexia?
Well, cerebellum is very involved in all kinds of reading, and for years, cerebellum was like, oh, that's not important. It's like eggs and egg yolks. For a while, it was like the perfect food, and then, oh no, it's terrible for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fashion. And cerebellum, now they're realizing it's incredibly important. And all of our higher functions when we perform a task, the task has to go down through the thread through the cerebellum and come back up in order for it to do well. So working the cerebellum and working the balance issues are really, really important for better brain function. And some exercise, like if you ever follow Jim Quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him do something the other day and he said, you do this movement and this, and then one hand goes twice as fast as the other. It looks silly, but it makes the brain work so hard.
Neuroplasticity again.
Yeah. So some you work at directly and some you work out with these exercises. There's a program called Brain Gym, and it has 26 different exercises in it, and they use it for little kids. They use it with old people, and it's all about balance, and it's all about integrating the brain.
Just go back, excuse me. You said dyslexia is not only about reading, it's speaking and language.
And
So
more than that. So
yeah, because like traditionally everyone, if dyslexia, it's a reading problem. But now you're saying it's speaking and a language processing.
it's language processing.
Okay.
When we first started the podcast, did you notice how you were searching for your words? That's part of it. Getting the right words there at the right time in the right place. It's just a processing issue. It's all there. It just doesn't get sorted out in the way.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of alphabet soup type of thing. All the letters flying all over until it finds its line. Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes people have problems speaking. They put the word the wrong place in the sentence, or they put the word, the letter the wrong place in the word, etc. And sometimes sound familiar. And sometimes it's in writing. So they know what it is they want to say. And you put it on the paper, you put it to the pen, and that is not what shows up on the paper. It gets lost with your thought. It gets lost somewhere between you and the expression of it. Sometimes it shows up, you're the last one to learn the dance steps or the moves at your feet. Because the feet, you can't quite figure out that right and left, and like you're trying to keep up with everybody, but it's not working so well.
Coordination now you're talking about.
Or yeah, it's all central, it's all central, it's all crossing the midline stuff. That's very important. Very important. Another thing that's very common is people with dyslexia often say, "Excuse me, what did you say?" And so the other person has to repeat themselves at least once or twice. And the other person, and then by the time the other person repeats it, you figure out what they said the first time.
Yeah, it caught up. It finally caught up. My brain caught up to what I heard the first time. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's another one of those processing issues. You heard it. You're not hard of hearing. It just takes an extra second. It's usually more on one side than the other for your brain to figure out what you heard. And when I'm checking, I just check with one finger in one ear and the other. It's like one ear hears it faster than the other ear. But your brain can't keep going until the slower part, your brain figures that out and it goes, okay, now I can go on. So if you're taking notes or you're listening to people, like part of you heard it, but you still have to ask somebody to repeat it because it's not all synchronized yet.
Correct. Yeah. That's why a lot of my notes are half written because I forgot what it is.
You can't listen and take notes at the same time.
No. It sounds a little bit like when I got the prisms for my eyes, to a neuro-optometrist, I was hearing better. And I said, there's no way, because usually what I never realized until COVID that I relied on lip reading. I lip read. So when someone was talking behind me, I wanted to listen, I had to turn around. I did not realize I was watching their lips the whole time. So this one session, I had the new glasses. I just tilted my head. I wasn't having to face them. And then when I told him I'm hearing better, he goes, yeah, that makes sense. Because now your audio and your visual are now meeting at the right time together.
Yes, exactly. I spend so much time on this because when you have a slow reader, the ear processes the information separately, and then the eyes process the information. So when speeches are written, they're often at about 150 to 200 words a minute. So that's as fast as your brain can process. So when you're reading a novel, it's going to take you, so that's 150 words a minute. Speed readers read anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 words a minute. They don't do that at all. It just goes in, it goes right in.
Yeah.
And so, but getting that processing, so these old, in the old days, person says, just a minute, I can't hear you, I have to put my eyeglasses on. Because we should be able to cross sense. We should see what we hear and hear what we see.
That sounds weird, but now I'm starting to believe that stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that, yeah, because then, and how much less effort, you probably had more energy in general.
Yeah.
That's only one example of how much extra work your brain was doing.
Yeah, just like with ADHD, and Nell Hollowell says, it's like your Ferrari engine for a brain with the bicycle brakes, and then the information is not getting all in at the same time, where we're getting too much information.
Right.
So, wow, this is fantastic. So dyslexia is not only a reading and a speaking issue, it's a language condition as well as some physical aspects to it.
A lot of balance and coordination issues.
Yeah. Brain synchronization. It's a brain synchronization and processing offset.
Yep.
So it's nothing wrong with it. It's just the information is not reaching the same spot at the same time. Or like you said, it's like defragmenting a hard drive that's just all garbled up. And neuroplasticity is the key to remove these obstacles.
You got it.
And
you did
wow,
good note taking.
I do. That's the only way I can remember stuff.
Well, you got the highlights. Good job.
Thank you.
Job. Yeah.
By the way, where can people find you? Because I like your website. There's lots of you that you do. I recommend anyone who's got dyslexia or think they have dyslexia, check out the website. And where can we find you?
Well, the website's just my name. And my last name is Books, which is such an ironic joke because it's for people who don't like to read books. But it's Books, not Brooks.
Just warning, she's not going to make you read a book.
No. The one guy from England said, "What your name is just like saying Dr. Nightmare. Can't you call yourself something else?" So it's just drphyllissbooks.com, and that's got lots of information on it. I have a YouTube site that's got like hundreds of testimonials, and I have a cooking channel within that if you want to eat better and so on.
Nice.
That they're good. And I'm not so hot on social media, so I don't do a lot with Instagram. I have Facebook, but and mostly, if you have questions, just reach out to me on my website. It's, if you have questions or contact, just shoot me an email or call, and I'm happy to just discuss what your issues are. Like at this age, I just turned 78, and I don't have to work at all if I don't want to. But the truth is, I love what I do, so why not? So I could choose who I want to be with, and if I want to spend time and talk with you and explore possibilities, I can. And Excellent. It is what I choose to do.
Well, I appreciate your knowledge and time here today. I know I learned a hell of a lot. And that dyslexia is not a moral failing or a weakness of you. It's no different than ADHD. It's a brain thing.
Yep.
And the question for you, the listener, is if you think you're dyslexic, it's easy to treat, is what I'm hearing, or remove the obstacles is a better terminology. So thanks, Dr. Phyllis, for joining me today.
Oh, thanks so much for asking me, Andre.
And to you, the listener, thanks again for learning with me. Talk to you soon.